Chapter 5. It was not with a light heart that I ascended the stairs to Susan Beresford's small bungalow. No matter how noble the intention, the fact remained. For the second time in a short period, I was about to commit a burglary.
It's still early in the week. Maybe a triple before the weekend?
The master key I had used at Archie's would have to go into service once more. Hesitantly, I inserted the key, feeling it slide smoothly into the well-oiled mechanism. I cast a guilty glance over my shoulder, stepped inside and closed the door. A quick look at the clock showed a few minutes after 2. Mrs. B had been very clear. I had an hour before her daughter was expected back from a beauty treatment at Bonita's spa. I thought about where to begin. I could probably skip the hallway. That wasn't where a billionaire's daughter would hide drugs. Unlike Archie, an ex-soldier used to sleeping shoulder to shoulder with strangers he couldn't trust, she would go for the normal places: bathroom, kitchen, or bedroom. For Mrs. B's sake, I really hoped the search would come up empty. A faint scent of feminine perfume lingered in the air. The fragrance was delightful, exclusive, sexy. Brand unknown, but it probably wasn't a buy-one-get-one-free deal at the corner shop. My eyes landed on a shoe rack brimming with high-end heels. Pumps, a few standout leather boots, and a sea of sandals. Even if she changed shoes 3 times a day, she wouldn't have to wear the same pair twice. I brushed off my own shoes against the doormat before proceeding. To the left was a bathroom where she had forgotten to turn off the lights. A few articles of clothing and a towel lay on the floor, accompanying the water droplets from the morning shower. I decided to save the bathroom for later, and continued. On the right was a simple bar kitchen, a standard model at Bonita, sparsely furnished and not the place one would prepare a 3-course meal. I doubted Susan Beresford had ever cooked anything there. Straight ahead, the door to the bedroom was ajar, and I decided to start there. As I pushed the door open, a new wave of the perfume greeted me. The room itself was abundant with evidence that Susan Beresford was a true slob. Women's magazines were strewn across the unmade double bed, while piles of clothing, likely dirty laundry that she had been too lazy to tend to, were scattered across the floor. People in her position probably didn't have to think about such simple things as making the bed or washing clothes. That's what the servants were for. The left wall was lined with wardrobes, ending with a giant dresser under a silver-framed mirror where I caught my own guilty face. On either side of the bed were armchairs, both filled to the brim with the ladies' travel bags. I lifted the lid of the nearest one. Empty. I let it be, rounded the bed, and tried the other. It too turned out to contain only air. The lady was messy, but she seemed to take care of her clothes. Another look at the watch showed there was still ample time. I fixed my eyes on the dresser. Several black velvet jewelry boxes of expensive-looking design were stacked in a neat pile. I opened the one on top. Carefully and methodically, I combed through all the small compartments. Every little space that could hold the tiniest speck of drugs was scrutinized. A bracelet had a very small silver box as a charm, and I opened it and looked inside as well. A clear realization struck me. If I found any yellow tablets with smiley faces like Archie's, he would discover that my protective attitude had a very definite limit. One single yellow tablet here, smiley face or not, and he would be off the island within 20 minutes. The search yielded nothing. In no time I had emptied the drawers, revealing pearl necklaces, rings, earrings, and assorted trinkets. At the bottom of the largest drawer, I found a beautifully embellished silver box that seemed promising. Inside was the largest diamond ring I had ever seen. I removed it and started to loosen the fabric in the box, but stopped and took another look. The setting was a massive chunk of brushed aluminum, giving it a somewhat weighty appearance. But the metal was uninteresting. It was the stone that stole the show. The size of a marble, it seemed to possess its own inner light, scattering colors in a magical dance. The spectacle almost made me stop breathing. I weighed it in my hand. What could something like this cost? 100,000? That would probably fall short. If it was authentic, it must be in the millions. I held the magnificent object to the light and examined it as if I were some diamond dealer from Holland. Even without any expertise, I realized that a few million was probably too conservative. The Beresfords were not exactly dirt poor. 20 million? Nah, 50 was probably more like it. Enough for any old former tennis player to retire, at least. As the thought entered my mind, I rejected it, but the forbidden idea wouldn't go away. It was so easy to imagine the stone slipping into my pocket. Continue a couple of more years at Bonita, and then return to Sweden via Amsterdam's Diamond District.
Set for life, wasn't that what the Americans said?
I gave myself a long, hard look in the mirror.
And then what, buddy? It doesn't work like that, and you know it.
With the realization that it was the first and last time in my life that I would ever hold something so valuable, I put it back in the box. Then I placed the jewelry boxes back into the same neat stack as before and paused, trying to figure out the most likely hiding spot. The top drawer of the dresser contained underwear, silky black panties with a lace trim in an indistinct floral pattern. I took a closer look. Every single pair was exactly the same, and there were quite a few, 30 pairs at least. Maybe she bought them in bulk. I entertained some unusual thoughts. How do the rich and famous handle their laundry? Did they use washing machines or just chuck them? Perhaps they're so disconnected from normal life that losing touch was simply inevitable. Could it be that she actually didn't change them daily, but instead reused them until they got stinky? One of the panties had fallen between the perfect piles. Without thinking, I picked it up and brushed it against my cheek. The silk felt cool against my skin, and I sniffed cautiously at the fabric. There was no discernible scent at all. I took another sniff just to be sure before putting it back in the drawer.
What are you doing?
Susan Beresford wore an expression that I hadn't seen before, almost as if she had stepped on a snail with one of the outrageously expensive sandals and was now considering the best way to scrape off the remains. I tried to come up with something, but her piercing gaze froze me in place. She repeated herself, this time with an unpleasant tone.
I said, what are you doing?
Ms. Beresford, I can explain.
I certainly hope so.
Our eyes locked. Clearly, whatever story I came up with, it had to be more than just good. Fantastic might get me halfway. Feeling like a schoolboy caught cheating, I looked away and tried to kickstart my brain.
A cleaner who lost a key or something? Who had asked for permission to search for it in her bungalow? Sure, but why would the tennis coach be the one to go look?
A simple thief, then?
Accusingly, she pointed her finger, stepped closer until she was nearly touching me, and jabbed it into my chest.
You know, I never would have guessed that you had these talents. I must say I'm surprised.
Her expression softened, and for a while, she almost looked amused. She exaggeratedly turned her head and looked down into the open drawer.
Sniffing my panties?
Evidently, the $50 million ring wasn't that important, now that she had a genuine sex offender on her hands. Ms. Beresford, as I said, there is an explanation. I haven't done anything illegal, and I haven't had the intention either.
Oh, really? Because I thought it would be difficult to keep your job after such a little indiscretion.
Softly, she let her hands rest on my shoulders and tilted her head.
How will you get out of this one, John Strand?
I pushed her hands away and took a few steps towards the door, towards freedom. Ms. Beresford. I took a deep breath. It was Mrs. B who sent me. She thinks you may be using drugs. Her disbelief was apparent.
My mom?
She stood motionless, pinning me down with her stare. Eventually, she tilted her head and let out a feeble chuckle.
Well, that's just splendid. My own mother hires snoops to rifle through my drawers? I mean, where is the trust?
She took 2 steps forward and poked me again in the chest.
Did you find anything then?
I stepped back, but she matched my step and closed the distance.
So, Mr. Detective, what about it?
Now she was so close that you couldn't even fit a playing card between us. Our eyes locked, and it felt like she could have swallowed me whole. I started to feel things that weren't mentioned in the job description for Bonita's staff. The magic was strong, and a weak person could have given in, but the amused smile gave her away. I pushed her aside, put my hand on the handle, and opened the front door a few inches, letting in the light and offering an escape route for exhausted burglars. No, Ms. Beresford, I didn't find anything. That's also what I'm going to tell Mrs. B. One more thing. I want to apologize for this intrusion into your privacy. A significant lapse in judgment on my part, and I deeply regret it. Just as I uttered the words, I realized that I was the biggest liar on earth. I didn't regret it one bit. The only problem was that I had been caught. Perhaps she could go ahead and cause trouble with Melinda Worth, but I doubted it. What would she say?
John Strand broke into my bungalow, and my mom is the gang leader.
The best thing now would be to discreetly nod goodbye and step out the door, but she wasn't finished with me. With 2 quick steps, she was near again. An inviting smile lit up as she resumed the seductive routine. The perfume engulfed me as she raised her palms in a submissive gesture.
I think there's a place you haven't searched yet.
A few seconds clicked away as she pulled me in with her tractor beam. In a moment of clarity, I realized how wonderful this could have been, if it had been real. The problem for her was that I saw right through her game. Entice, tease. If it didn't work with a bit of skin, just show more, and so on and so forth. Then, when the poor victim was completely disoriented, the piece of meat would naturally be yanked away, and the little minnow would turn on her heel and disappear. She held up her hands and shook them in front of me as if to demonstrate her non-threatening nature. After the magic gestures, she tucked them behind her back and looked at me with half-closed eyes. The acting should have earned her a lead role in any Hollywood production. Inside, she was likely bursting with laughter.
Well?
Instead of answering, I pushed the door wide open and walked out while I still had a shred of dignity left.